Welcome, dear listener, to Night Stories from the VHS era. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Do you remember what it felt like to wait the whole day just to hear one song? Do you remember flipping through the pages of the radio schedule and the TV guide, really hoping that your favorite track would be played that evening? And when it finally did your heart race as you ran to hit the record button before the DJ's voice came in again? Tonight, let's go back there, to that moment, to that small, sacred ritual of waiting, hoping, and listening, when the DJ held the fate of your entire afternoon in the tone of his voice and the timing of his playlist. Stay with me until the end of this story, because tonight, you'll remember how something as simple as a song on the radio could light up an entire day. And I'll tell you exactly what happened the day my favorite song finally played. It all began on a Tuesday in early June, 1996. It was one of those warm, golden mornings where the sunlight filtered through the curtains in streaks, painting the floor with quiet promises of summer. School was nearly over, and there was a buzz in the air, not from excitement, but from the old box fan humming in the corner of my room. I was already awake, sprawled across my bed in a tie-dye tee I'd worn 3 days in a row, a faded Sony cassette tape lying on my chest like a badge of honor. Its little paper label had smudged from too many fingerprints, and I had scribbled on it in blue ink, "Hits, wait and see." Next to me, on my nightstand, was the guide. You know the one, the folded weekly schedule from the Sunday paper with the bright orange header and the grid of time slots laid out like a battlefield. I had circled Magic 9.87 FM in a red pen, my eyes scanning the 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. block where Top 8 at 6 would air. That was my shot, my only chance. Back then, you couldn't just tap a screen and listen to a song on demand. You couldn't even be sure you would hear it at all. The DJ was the gatekeeper, the wizard behind the mic, deciding with a flick of his wrist whether your afternoon would be unforgettable or quietly disappointing. Why didn't I just buy the song, you ask? Because sometimes it wasn't that easy. You needed the cassette single, or a full album if you were lucky. Maybe a friend's older brother had it, but he wasn't sharing. Or maybe your allowance that week had already gone into a pack of Gushers and a couple of Pogs. So the radio, it was everything. And the only weapon we had was patience and timing. I remember lying there watching the ceiling fan spin lazily above me, going over the schedule again and again like it might change if I stared hard enough. My fingers fidgeted with the plastic buttons on my silver Iowa boombox. It had that record and play combo. You had to press just right or it wouldn't engage. And the worst part? You couldn't blink. Because if you missed the first second of the song, it was ruined. I had been waiting for weeks for this song. I Love You Always Forever by Donna Lewis.
You remember it, don't you? That breathy voice, the floating melody, the kind of sound that wrapped around your chest like a warm towel after swimming all afternoon. I had heard it once, in passing, while my mom drove me back from Blockbuster. It was playing low beneath a car ad, and I had caught just enough of it to fall in love. From that moment, it became a mission. Every day after school, I'd run past the rusted mailbox, tear off my backpack, and toss myself into that room with the singular goal of listening and waiting. Sometimes I'd get lucky. Sometimes the DJ would tease it. Coming up next, something you've all been requesting. My heart would leap. I'd hover over the record button, my fingers trembling slightly, and then he'd play something else. Why was it always something else? I'd stare at the wall, half laughing, half crushed, but I never gave up. On this particular day, I remember it clearer than most. The house was quiet, My sister was at a friend's place. My mom was downstairs slicing apples in the kitchen. The smell of cinnamon drifted up the staircase as I adjusted the antenna on the boombox, trying to eliminate that faint static hum. Do you remember how careful you had to be with the antenna? One wrong touch and it would hiss at you. But if you got it just right, tilted it slightly, maybe wrapped a little foil at the end, it was like catching a ghost signal from another world. The time ticked closer to 6. I had rewound the tape to just the right spot, with enough blank space before the music would start. I whispered a small prayer, not out loud, just in my mind. Please play it, just this once. And then the DJ came on. His voice was a velvet drawl, the kind you only appreciated once you were older. He had that cool confidence, like he knew the power he held over 1,000 bedrooms just like mine. And now, he said, dragging the words like a slow dance, here's one for those of you who've been asking. Donna Lewis, you know the one. My heart skipped. My fingers slammed the record button down, the little red light blinked, the tape rolled, and there it was. That soft synth, that dreamy intro, it was happening. I sat perfectly still, barely breathing. The sound wasn't perfect, grainy, little wavy at times, but it didn't matter. In that moment, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. Do you know what it felt like to finally capture the song you had been waiting for all week? To have it there, on tape, as your own, with the tiny bit of DJ's voice fading out behind it like a signature. It felt like winning, like magic, like something no one could take away from you. I listened to that recording every night that week, even though the first few seconds were clipped and the ending caught a bit of a weather update. But it was mine. And that, my friend, is how it was. That's what it meant to wait for your song on the radio. That was the rhythm of life in the 90s. And yes, the DJ really did decide the fate of your day.
The thing people forget is how still you had to be. Recording off the radio was not some lazy, passive thing. It was a vigil, a ritual, a test of patience and timing. You weren't just waiting for a song, you were readying yourself for it. Fingers poised, nerves coiled like springs. You could lose it all in one distracted breath. After I finally got I Love You Always Forever onto that tape, something changed in me. That victory had only whetted my appetite. I wanted more. I needed more. That little moment, catching the song I loved, made me feel like I had a kind of control over something in the world, even if it was just a 3-minute song with a hiss of static under it. And so the next day, I rewound the tape all the way to the end of that track. I carefully positioned it so the next song would start exactly after Donna's final fading words. That's how I liked it. Seamless. No space between songs. It felt cleaner that way, like a real mixtape you might buy from Camelot Music or Sam Goody. I wanted it to flow. This time I was hoping for Always Be My Baby by Mariah Carey. You remember that one? Of course you do. Everyone does. It was like honey on the speakers. Light, sweet, untouchable. The kind of song that made everything feel okay, even if you didn't know what everything meant yet. That afternoon, I got home from school and didn't even take off my shoes. I dropped my backpack by the couch, grabbed a Capri Sun from the fridge, and hurried up to my room. I remember the light coming in from the window, how it bounced off the posters on my wall. Tamagotchis, the Spice Girls, and a torn-out magazine ad for Surge Soda. My whole room felt like a time capsule in motion. And there it was, my Iowa boombox sitting on the desk like it was waiting for me. That cassette was already inside, blank on one side, labeled on the other in messy blue ink. I clicked it over to the blank side. The little tabs had been popped out so no one could accidentally tape over my first song, and I had stuck a folded-up corner of a sticky note in there, just in case, to protect it even more. I sat down in my desk chair, both elbows on my knees, the boombox directly in front of me. The antenna was already in position, bent outward with just the right amount of tinfoil wrapped around the tip. The reception was perfect that day, like even the air itself was cooperating. My right hand hovered above the record and play buttons, already halfway pressed in, just waiting for the moment I'd have to push them both down at once. My left hand held the track list I had written out earlier on a piece of lined notebook paper. 8 songs I was hoping to catch by the end of the week. I even ranked them by priority, giving Mariah's song 2 little stars beside it. That's how serious it was. And the tension. I can still feel it now, as if I were back in that exact spot. Every time the DJ's voice came on, I straightened up. Every time a song started, I leaned in. And every time it wasn't my song, I sank back down, trying not to feel too let down. But I couldn't let myself relax completely. I couldn't zone out or flip through a comic book or even turn my head away. Because the second I did, that's when it would play. That was always when it would play. I remember sitting there, the minutes passing slowly like molasses in the middle of summer. There were moments where I almost gave up, where I told myself it probably wouldn't happen today, that I was just wasting my time. But still, I waited, because there was always that one chance.
That beautiful, impossible, maybe it'll happen chance. Isn't it strange how hope used to feel heavier back then? How it could live in your chest for hours, buzzing quietly, not going anywhere. Today, everything is so instant, so on demand, that we never really get to hope for something. Not the way we used to. Back then, even waiting wrong could cost you. Sometimes the DJ would play 2 songs in a row with barely a breath between them, and if your finger wasn't already on the record button, you lost it. Other times, he'd talk over the intro just enough to ruin the beginning, and you'd have to decide, do I keep it anyway, or wait another day and try again? Do you remember that awful feeling when you realized the song was playing, but you had taken your eyes off the dial for just a second? That happened to me once, with Breakfast at Tiffany's by Deep Blue Something. I had gone to the bathroom, just for a moment, and when I came back, it was already halfway through the chorus. I wanted to scream. But not that day. Not with Mariah. Because after nearly 2 hours of sitting, waiting, hoping, I heard that unmistakable wind chime intro. That light, floaty rhythm that meant only one thing. My whole body jumped. I hit record so hard the boombox jolted on the desk. The tape whirred to life, the red light blinked, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I didn't dare move. And it played. It played perfectly. No DJ intro, no voice fading in or out, just pure, clean sound. That song floated through my room like a secret, like it had come just for me. When it ended, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I sat back, looked down at the tape, and whispered, yes. Not loudly, not dramatically, just softly, like a quiet thank you. The second song was locked in. The mixtape was becoming real. It was strange how something as simple as pressing record could feel like a triumph, how it could lift your whole mood. It wasn't just about the music, it was about capturing something, making it yours. Today, we don't do that anymore. There's no need to wait, no fear of missing, no fingers trembling above buttons, just playlists and algorithms and shuffle modes. But that tension, that concentration, it made everything mean more. That night, I fell asleep with my headphones on, the tape playing softly in the dark, the 2 songs looping again and again. And I remember thinking, tomorrow, I'll try for a third.
By the 3rd day, something subtle had shifted in my body. I was still doing the same thing, sitting in my room, crouched over the boombox like it was a lifeline. But now there was a kind of muscle memory to the process. I didn't even have to think anymore. My finger hovered over the record button naturally, my eyes moved between the dial and the window, my ears were tuned to the tiniest cues, a pause in the DJ's voice, a chord that sounded familiar, a beat that might signal something I had waited hours to hear. But what I remember most clearly from those afternoons wasn't always the song I was chasing. It was the songs in between, the ones I didn't care about, the ones I didn't particularly like, the ones that weren't cool to admit you knew by heart, but that somehow burned themselves into your memory anyway. Because back then, you couldn't skip. You couldn't fast forward unless you knew exactly where to stop. And even then, you risked overshooting or cutting off part of something important. So you listened to everything, and it made everything matter. I remember one afternoon when I was waiting, this time for Ironic by Alanis Morissette, and the station played Macarena right before it. I hated that song, I really did, but I listened. I sat there, half smiling, half miserable, watching the little reels spin inside the cassette window, waiting, just in case. Because what if the next song was the one? What if you got up to go grab a snack pack from the kitchen and missed your moment? What if the song came on and you weren't there to press record? That fear kept you loyal. Loyal to the radio. Loyal even to the songs you didn't love. Because the station didn't care what you were hoping for. It had its own rhythm, its own mysterious plan, and all you could do was listen and hope your moment would come. So I listened, even when they played that one Sheryl Crow song for the third time that week, even when the DJ made dumb jokes about boy bands and teased tracks that never came, even when they played Green Day's When I Come Around for what felt like the 100th time, and it still wasn't what I was waiting for. But something funny started happening. The more I listened to those other songs, the more they started to grow on me. Not because I suddenly liked them on their own, but because they became part of the ritual, part of the memory. Like bookmarks in a chapter of a long unfolding story. I started to hum along, tap the desk with my fingertips, catch myself mouthing lyrics I swore I didn't care about. And maybe I didn't love every song, but I began to know them, to recognize the first few seconds of each one like old friends you didn't choose but still smiled at in the hallway. There was something comforting about that in a weird way. You couldn't control the playlist, but you could control how you waited. And in that waiting, there was a strange kind of peace because it forced you to be present, to pay attention. You weren't skipping around, jumping from song to song. You were there, in it, for better or worse. And there was always this little rush that came at the start of every track.
That tiny maybe. Maybe this was it. Maybe it would start slow and then surprise you. Maybe the DJ had shuffled things around. Maybe they were saving the best for the second half of the hour. So you sat through everything. I sat through One Headlight by the Wallflowers, through Counting Blue Cars by Dishwalla, through every single track by Gin Blossoms, even the ones I couldn't stand. I even sat through Kiss from a Rose by Seal, which made me feel strangely sad in a way I didn't understand yet. And each one became part of the soundtrack of my waiting. It wasn't just background noise anymore. It was part of the process. Looking back, I think that's something we've lost. The ability to let things unfold slowly, with all their imperfections and side roads. Now we skip, we search, we curate. But back then, we listened. And because of that, even the songs I didn't want became part of the story I was building. This strange, sacred mixtape that was slowly filling up with the sounds of a whole summer. There was one moment I remember especially well. The station had just finished playing Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind, a song I didn't even like that much, but had memorized from sheer repetition. And I had started to relax. I figured the next one would be another throwaway. I leaned back in my chair, legs stretched out, ready to let it wash over me. And then, without warning, I heard the opening piano chords to Ironic. My breath caught. My whole body jolted forward. I slammed the buttons record and play in one fluid motion. I had practiced so many times it felt like instinct. And just like that, I had it. I had her. Alanis singing softly through the speakers, every line a mix of sarcasm and sadness, and something else I couldn't name yet, but felt deeply even at that age. It was in that moment I realized something. The waiting, the long hours of songs I didn't care for, the commercials, the cheesy jokes, the missed cues, it all mattered. Because it made this moment feel like lightning in a bottle,
like I had caught something rare and beautiful that wouldn't have meant half as much if it had come easy. And the strange thing is, after that, I started letting the tape run a little longer, even after I had what I came for, because I didn't want to miss what might come next. I even found myself hoping for songs I had once ignored. They had become part of my world, part of the soft background hum of a summer spent hoping. That's how it was in the 90s. You listened to every song not because you loved them all, but because any one of them might lead to the one you were waiting for. And in doing so, they became something more. Even now, if I hear Breakfast at Tiffany's or Only Want to Be With You, something tugs at the edges of my memory. I don't hear them as hits. I hear them as moments. As pieces of those long afternoons, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, tape rolling, heart waiting. They weren't just songs. They were the sound of waiting for something you loved.
After I had finally recorded Ironic, my confidence grew. 3 songs now lived on that cassette, and the tape was beginning to feel like more than a collection. It was becoming a time capsule. Each song wasn't just a track. It was a whole scene, a memory, a feeling, a room full of silence and anticipation. But recording music from the radio came with one rule, one absolute, unbreakable commandment: silence. Not just quiet, not just lowering your voice. It had to be complete, undisturbed silence, because any little sound, any cough, any sneeze, any door creaking open, any "dinner's ready" yelled up the stairs could ruin everything. And the worst part? You only knew it was ruined after the song had finished. That's the kind of tension we lived with. It was as if every time I pressed record, I wasn't just capturing a song, I was also entering a fragile, invisible pact with the universe. A deal that said, if everyone stays perfectly still, perfectly quiet, if nothing interrupts this sacred moment, then the music will live forever, untouched. But if anything went wrong, if the phone rang or the dog barked or someone decided to vacuum the hallway, the magic would shatter instantly. I started to develop a system. Whenever I was about to record, I'd glance at the door, my bedroom door with the no entry sign made from a sheet of wide-ruled notebook paper caped with a blue Lisa Frank sticker. I would gently press it closed, slowly, carefully, so the latch wouldn't make that click that echoed like a cannon in a quiet house. Then I'd lower the volume on my own voice, just in case I accidentally spoke to myself while waiting. I even practiced holding in sneezes. Yes, really. There was one time, and I'll never forget this, I had waited almost 3 full hours for Always by Bon Jovi. I had heard it once before and wanted it, needed it to live on my tape. I was exhausted from the wait. My legs were stiff, my mouth dry from not getting up for water, and then just as it began to play, I felt it. The sneeze. That awful creeping tickle in the back of my nose, the kind that makes your whole body brace like you're standing on the edge of something dangerous. I panicked. My hands were already pressing record. The song was playing, crystal clear. Bon Jovi's voice was right there, echoing through the speakers. I couldn't move. I couldn't sneeze. I squeezed my nose with 2 fingers, leaned backward, and prayed. Somehow, the sneeze passed. Or maybe my willpower held it down just long enough. I kept the recording, but it was a near disaster. Other times, I wasn't so lucky. There was another day, a hot, heavy afternoon in July where I'd managed to catch the first few seconds of Wonderwall by Oasis, another song I'd been waiting on. I had everything ready. The tape clicked into motion. I sat perfectly still. And then, from downstairs, the worst possible thing happened. "Alan, phone!" My mom's voice, bright and echoing up the stairwell, landed directly in the middle of the chorus. I nearly cried. It wasn't her fault. Of course it wasn't. But in that moment, I felt betrayed by the world. I stormed downstairs, trying not to let the frustration show, trying not to snap because she didn't understand. No one really understood. How could they?
They didn't know the feeling of capturing something so delicate, something that only played when it wanted to, something that refused to be replayed at the push of a button. They didn't know what it meant to wait, to hope, to almost have it, and then lose it to the sound of your name being called down the hallway. After that, I began hanging a sign on the door during my recording hours. Shh! Taping in progress! In thick black Sharpie, underlined twice. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. There were always new risks, like the time my little cousin burst into my room to show me his new Goosebumps book, mid-recording of Because You Loved Me by Celine Dion. He meant well, of course, but the moment he opened the door and started talking, the recording was done for. I could have erased it and waited for the song to come again, but I didn't. I kept that one, with his voice softly in the background. Maybe I didn't realize it then, but that little interruption became part of the memory. Still, most of the time, I fought for silence. There was an art to it. I would plan my afternoons like a quiet military operation. Close the windows to keep out the sound of the neighbor's lawnmower. Turn off the box fan, even if it meant sweating. Remove the batteries from my Tamagotchi so its beeps wouldn't interfere. Even the creak of my chair could cost me a clean recording. I would sit there, motionless, barely even blinking, while the reel inside the tape clicked and spun. The irony is, I never noticed how noisy the world was until I tried to hold it still. How every house is full of tiny, unpredictable sounds. The ticking of clocks, the shifting of floorboards, the groaning of pipes when someone turned on a faucet, the birds outside chirping like they had something urgent to say, the dull hum of a CRT television in another room, just barely audible through the walls. And still, somehow, I tried to carve out this perfect space of stillness in the middle of all that chaos. That silence, it became a kind of sanctuary, a sacred pause, a room I built not with walls but with effort, with attention, with stillness. And when it worked, when the recording came out clean, untouched, perfect from start to finish, it felt like a tiny miracle, like I had pulled something pure out of the air, wrapped it up in magnetic tape, and stored it somewhere only I could access. That's how much it mattered. That's how deeply we cared. Today, people add digital noise to recordings to make them sound authentic. They miss the hiss, the occasional pop, the uneven levels. They miss the feel of something real, something earned. But we didn't need to fake it. We had the real thing, and we fought for every second of it. So the next time you hear a song from that era, one that maybe you recorded yourself, try to remember the silence behind it, the stillness you had to create, the breath you held, the sneeze you stifled. Because behind every perfect mixtape, there was a kid sitting cross-legged on the floor, trying with all their might not to make a single sound.
You always knew the first second mattered most. It was the breath before the magic, the part that told you the song was truly beginning. That first soft piano key, that opening guitar strum, that little vocal sigh before the first word was sung. Without it, the whole thing felt incomplete. And yet somehow, no matter how hard I tried, I kept missing it. Not every time, but often enough that it hurt. It was the kind of mistake that didn't just ruin the tape. It haunted you, because you knew it had been right there. You were so close. You had waited, watched, prepared, and still it slipped through your fingers like a dream you forgot the second you woke up. I can't count how many times it happened. That single moment of distraction, that tiny lapse in focus. Maybe I reached for a soda, maybe I turned my head to check the time on my Casio digital watch. Maybe I thought, just for a second, I can look away. And that's always when it would start. The song. The song. And the second I realized it, I'd lunge forward, slamming the record and play buttons with a jolt of panic. But it was too late. The first few seconds were gone. Sometimes it was just one note, just the opening beat, but it didn't matter. You knew. You always knew that song would now start in the middle of itself, like a story missing its first sentence. It's hard to explain how devastating that felt unless you were there, unless you lived it, unless you knew how long we waited for those songs, how deeply we listened for them. It wasn't like today when you can just drag the little slider back and start over. There was no rewind on the radio, no redo, no play again. If you missed the beginning, that was it. It was like watching the last cookie fall off the table and hit the floor frosting side down. You could try to salvage it, but deep down you knew it wasn't the same. I remember one Saturday afternoon when the station announced a 90s countdown. My heart raced. This was guaranteed. They were going to play everything, and I had a fresh TDK tape labeled neatly with a ruler and a fine-tip pen. I sat through hours of music. I already had some of the tracks, but I wanted clean versions, better ones, full intros. And then, somewhere around number 3 on the countdown, it came. Torn by Natalie Imbruglia. It had only come out a few months before, but it was already all over the place. You could hear it from passing cars, grocery store speakers, even department store dressing rooms. But I didn't have it on tape yet. Not properly. Not clean. I was waiting for it. And I knew it was close. The DJ paused, took a breath, said something like, "You've been asking for it. Here it is." And for some reason, I hesitated. Just for a second. Maybe it was the way he said it. Maybe I was expecting another ad first. Maybe I was just tired from sitting there all afternoon. And then it happened. The opening strum, that now iconic bittersweet chord that felt like autumn in your chest. I hit the buttons. The tape began rolling. But the first 3 seconds were gone. And it ruined me. Not the whole day, not in any real dramatic way, but enough to leave this bitter taste, this little echo of almost. Because it was almost perfect, almost mine, but not quite. I kept the recording. Of course I did. I still played it, still loved it. But every time I listened to it, I winced at that opening, because I knew what was missing. I could hear it in my head, filling in the blank space that wasn't there. That missing piece became part of the memory, and I wasn't alone in that frustration. All of us, anyone who ever sat crouched by a radio with a blank tape, knew that feeling. You waited for hours, and then in one blink, you lost the part that mattered most. It made you furious at first, then sad. Then somehow it just became part of the ritual. I started making little symbols on my tape labels. A tiny triangle if the song was missing the intro, a circle if it had a DJ talking over it, a star if it was perfect. There were very few stars, but even the imperfect ones had a kind of beauty, because they reminded you of what it took, that you didn't just download a song or add it to a playlist. You had to catch it, hunt it, sit with it, be ready, and even then, sometimes it slipped past you, like sunlight on the floor that moves just before you reach it. I learned to live with the gaps, to accept the recordings that began mid-word or where the first line was cut in half, because they were mine. Flawed, yes, but mine. They told the story of how hard I had tried, how deeply I had cared, how long I had waited. Sometimes I'd listen to those almost perfect songs and imagine the missing beginning. I could hear it in my mind, as clear as if it were really there. I knew it by heart. I felt it. And maybe that's why those recordings still mean something now. Because they weren't just recordings. They were efforts, experiences, hours of waiting, hoping, breathing shallow, fingers ready. And once you've lived that kind of effort, once you've missed something just barely, it stays with you. It becomes a lesson in patience, in disappointment, in beauty even when it isn't whole. That's what those tapes taught us. Not every song would come easy. Not every moment would be perfect. But we kept showing up anyway. Kept pressing record. Kept listening. Even when the first few seconds were gone. Especially then. Because sometimes, in the middle of the imperfection, we found something even more valuable than the song itself. We found ourselves, waiting, hoping, still trying.
I think what made it all worth it, the waiting, the quiet, the almost, the ruined intros, was that once in a while, everything went right. Not often, but just enough. And when it did, it felt like the universe had noticed you. Like all the invisible work you had put into hoping and listening and trying had finally paid off. That's how it felt the first time I captured a song perfectly. I still remember the moment like it's burned into the air of that old room. The way the sunlight hit the corner of my desk, the way the Iowa boombox clicked when I slid the fresh tape inside, the exact quiet that settled around me, broken only by the soft hiss of the speakers. It was a weekday. Maybe a Thursday, near the end of summer break. The house had that quiet hum it only had when no one was around. No vacuuming, no TV murmuring from downstairs, no footsteps in the hallway. Just stillness. And that stillness felt like a chance. I had a new blank tape, still warm from its plastic wrap, and my list of songs I was hunting that week. Counting Crows, A Long December, sat in small, careful handwriting near the top, with 3 stars beside it. That one wasn't just a favorite, it felt necessary. There was something in that song that matched the slow sadness of the summer ending, the way the lyrics drifted out like memories you didn't understand yet. I wanted that track like a keepsake, a way to bottle the way everything felt during those fading afternoons. I waited like I always did. No movement, no talking, no distractions, just listening. The DJ's voice floated out through the speaker, soft and unhurried. He had that kind of voice you could fall asleep to, the kind that wrapped around you like a blanket. And then he said it. Up next, a little something for those long summer days. Counting Crows, Stay Close. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I pressed the record and play buttons so gently, it felt like a ceremony. And it happened. The intro played in full. The piano chords fell softly, perfectly into the room. No talking, no static from outside, no noise from the floorboards. Just the song, whole and untouched. I sat perfectly still, afraid to even shift in my chair. Every second felt fragile. I watched the spools turn, watched the red light blink steadily, watched the time on my little digital clock tick forward slowly. And the song kept going. The verses, the chorus, the soft ache in the way he sang, "It's been a long December and there's reason to believe maybe this year will be better than the last." Even now I can hear that line in my mind and remember exactly how I felt when I heard it come through my speakers, clean and complete. When the last note faded out and the DJ's voice returned, not over the final chord, but after it, I hit stop. Then silence. The room felt full somehow, like something important had happened inside of it.
I looked down at the tape, just a simple cassette, plastic and magnetic ribbon, and a little label with block letters. But in that moment, it was a treasure, something sacred. I didn't shout or cheer. I didn't run around the room. That kind of joy would have felt too loud. Instead, I smiled, quietly, softly, like someone had handed me a gift without saying a word. Because when you got the full song, really got it, something inside of you settled, like the wait had been worth it, like all the near misses, all the clipped beginnings, all the muffled voices and background noises had finally led to this perfect capture. A tiny miracle on magnetic tape. That night I played it again and again, headphones on, lights off, just that one track, over and over, rewinding carefully each time so I wouldn't risk damaging it.
I studied every second. The way the piano faded in, the soft click of the drumsticks, the breath in his voice before the first word. All of it felt earned, like I hadn't just heard the song, I had caught it. You don't really think of yourself as a hunter when you're 13 and sitting in your bedroom with the boombox, but that's what we were. Sound hunters, memory collectors. We were catching pieces of the world and holding on to them any way we could. That's why those tapes mattered so much, because we made them. We built them. One song at a time, one try at a time. And every perfect capture was proof that we had paid attention, that we had listened long enough, waited hard enough, cared enough. In the days that followed, I guarded that tape like it was something alive. I rewound it slowly, never yanked it out, never loaned it to anyone. I labeled it with care, tucked it into the fabric drawer where I kept the others. Sometimes I would open that drawer and just look at it, knowing it was in there, waiting, knowing it was complete. Sometimes I'd imagine an entire tape of perfect catches, no clipped intros, no DJ voice fading in, just one song after another, whole and clear. But in truth, that wasn't how it usually went. The truth was most tapes were messy. A little static here, a missing lyric there, maybe some background noise, maybe your little sister asking if you wanted SpaghettiOs as the bridge played. But that's what made the perfect ones so rare, so special. They didn't just happen, they arrived. Quietly, unexpectedly, like a falling star. You didn't cheer, you didn't scream, you just sat there and felt it. And maybe that's what made the whole thing beautiful. Not just the music, but the waiting, the trying, the almosts, and then finally the quiet celebration. The soft smile, the warm flickering pride of knowing that just this once, you caught it. All of it.
After a perfect recording, a song captured from start to finish without a single flaw, there was only one thing left to do. You had to honor it. And the way we did that was by decorating the cassette label. Not just writing the name of the song, but really decorating it, turning that tiny, glossy rectangle of white paper into a kind of miniature monument, a trophy, one made by hand. In those days, a cassette label wasn't just for function, it was a place to celebrate the moment, a canvas where your excitement could spill out in scribbles and stars and little letters too small to read unless you squinted. And I loved it. I had a whole ritual. First, I'd take out my pencil case, the soft denim one with a busted zipper and a faded patch of Lisa Frank dolphins on one side. Inside were all the tools I needed. Thin-tip markers in every color, a black Pilot pen for writing the titles, a highlighter that had long since dried out but still felt good to hold, and most important of all, the gel pens. Those glorious 90s gel pens, they glided like butter across the label's smooth surface, leaving streaks of glittery green, silver, or neon purple. Some even smelled like fruit, though I wasn't entirely sure why that mattered. It just felt right. Before writing anything down, I'd look at the tape itself. I'd rewind it, listen to the song I'd just recorded, sometimes 2 or 3 times, just to let it soak in. Then I'd stop the boombox and set the tape gently on the desk like a treasure being presented. Then came the writing. Careful, slow, deliberate. Track 4, Counting Crows, A Long December. I always wrote the track number first. It made it feel official, like a real album. Then the artist, then the song. I kept the handwriting small and neat, using a ruler if I needed to keep it straight. And if I had more than one song on the tape already, I'd number each new one down the side of the cardboard insert, spacing them evenly, like chapters in a book. But the best part, the real fun, was the doodling. Each song got its own design. For A Long December, I drew little snowflakes in the margins of the label. Not because it was cold outside, it wasn't, but because the song made it feel that way inside me. I added a tiny tree with no leaves, then shaded the corners of the paper with a gray pencil to give it that cloudy winter feel. For Always Be My Baby, I used pink gel pen and drew hearts all around the title with a little swirl under the artist's name.
I even added a star on top, like it was sitting on a pedestal. That tape felt important. Other tapes had lightning bolts, musical notes, random spirals, smiley faces, peace signs. A lot of peace signs. Sometimes I'd write the names in bubble letters and color each one in with a different shade. Sometimes I'd make a whole border around the edge with alternating triangles just to give it more flair. And if the song had a special story, like the time I managed to record Ironic without a single interruption, I'd write a secret little code next to it. Just a symbol I understood. A memory embedded in the ink. It wasn't just decoration. It was marking the moment.
Because when you captured a song, it wasn't enough to just listen to it. You had to honor it. And the label was where you told that story, even if no one else ever saw it. Looking back, those tapes were like personal diaries disguised as playlists. Each one told more than just what I listened to. It told where I was, how I felt, what kind of day it had been. The doodles were my version of mood rings, shifting with each song, each capture, each quiet victory. I had one tape where the whole label was covered in stars, the little kind you draw with 5 points in one continuous line. That one had all my best recordings, the cleanest intros, no DJ voices, no clipped chords. I called it Perfect Stars, and it lived in the top drawer of my nightstand, wrapped in a square of old flannel like it was something fragile. I'd open that drawer sometimes just to look at it, to read the label, to remember. Because each title, each doodle, brought me right back to the moment I made it. The blue ink smudge on track 3 reminded me of the day I wrote it. Too fast, too excited, my hand shaking from joy after catching I'll Be There For You by the Rembrandts just in time. The tiny little sketch of a sun on the side of the tape with Walking on the Sun by Smash Mouth took me back to the hot August afternoon when I finally recorded it, sweat dripping down my back as I sat still, silent, determined. Those weren't just tapes. They were time. They were afternoons and evenings and little chapters of my life wrapped in plastic and pen. And the labels? They were where I stored the joy. The quiet, glowing pride of having made something real. Something no one could buy or download or swipe away. They were imperfect, sometimes messy, always sincere. And I think that's why I loved making them so much. Because the world back then was full of things you couldn't control. School, parents, weather, the unpredictable DJ on the radio. But this label, this tiny rectangle of space, that was mine. I could make it beautiful, or silly, or serious, or secret, and every time I slid the tape back into its clear case, clicking it shut, I felt that tiny swell of pride. Not loud, not flashy, just enough. Enough to know I'd made something. And that it mattered.
It's funny how something so small could hold so much weight. Just a strip of magnetic tape rolled tightly inside a plastic shell with little gears and reels that whirred with every push of the play button. It didn't seem like it could hold anything more than sound. But for us, back then, it held entire worlds. And when we finally captured the perfect song, when we managed to tape it from the radio start to finish without a DJ voice bleeding in or a background cough or a missed beat, we didn't just play it once and move on. We replayed it over and over until it became a kind of ritual, until it became a rhythm in our lives, until eventually the tape itself began to give out. The sound would start to warp a little, just slightly at first. You could hear it if you knew the song well enough, and by that point, we always did. The vocals might wobble like someone was pulling them through water. The bass would stretch and crackle. The high notes would hiss. Sometimes, if the tape had been rewound and played too many times in a row, it would slow down slightly, like the song was sighing from exhaustion. But we didn't care. We kept pressing play, because each time we heard it again, it took us to the same place, the same exact feeling, as if the air turned to the same temperature, as if the light in the room shifted, as if we were momentarily back in that first moment when we had caught it, when the red light was on and we were sitting still and the world had finally given us something just right. That's what those songs became, little portals, emotional shortcuts. And once we had them, we held on to them tightly. I remember how my tape of A Long December began to sound after maybe the 40th or 50th replay. The piano intro had this slight wobble now, just enough to notice. The vocals were thinner, more distant. But in a strange way, I liked it even more. It made this song feel older, like it had lived with me. Like the tape and I were growing up at the same pace. It wasn't just the music wearing out, it was the memory embedding itself deeper. Each time I hit rewind, I did it with the same quiet rhythm. 2 fingers pressing the button down, waiting for the sound of the gears spinning, stopping right before the track began again. Then, play. And again. And again. I would lie on my bed with my head hanging slightly off the side, legs crossed at the ankles, ceiling fans spinning above me in lazy circles. The tape would play. The room would disappear, and I would just float inside the sound. Sometimes I played the same song 5, 6, even 10 times in a row. No skipping, no shuffling, just repeat. Do you remember what it felt like to love a song so much that you couldn't get full? Like each listen was a bite of your favorite memory? I remember doing that with Name by Goo Goo Dolls. That soft acoustic opening, the vulnerable lyrics, the way it felt like someone whispering a secret they hadn't told anyone else.
I must have played it so many times that summer that the tape hissed constantly under it. The background was never silent anymore. Just the soft, steady breath of static that lived behind the song like a ghost. But it didn't ruin it. If anything, it added something. Proof that it had been played, that it had been loved, that the moment had mattered. Tapes didn't last forever. We knew that. You could hear them degrading over time, the way an old pair of jeans starts to fray at the knees. But that wear was part of the story. I had a tape where the 3rd track always clicked slightly at the chorus because the ribbon had been crinkled once when I accidentally yanked it out too fast. I tried to smooth it with a pencil, gently rolling it back into place, but the damage had already been done. Still, I kept it. Still, I played it because that version, with its hiccups and hisses, was mine. It had been shaped by my hands, by my mistakes, by how much I had played it again and again and again. Sometimes I think the songs we played the most were the ones we didn't know how to let go of. Not because we didn't want to move on, but because they gave us something we didn't want to lose. A feeling, a memory, a sense of being seen. And the more we played them, the deeper they burrowed into us. Even now, when I hear Torn or I'll Be There For You or Because You Loved Me, I don't just hear the song. I hear the tape spinning. I hear the little click when the head inside the boombox moved into position. I hear the low hum of anticipation, the silence of my room, the stillness of those afternoons. I hear myself at that age, patient, hopeful, completely lost inside the sound. And when the tape finally began to fail completely, when the song no longer played right or the ribbon inside started to stretch too much, I didn't throw it out. I retired it. Carefully. Respectfully. Like you'd fold up a favorite shirt that had worn too thin to wear again. Sometimes I'd write "full" on the side of the case in capital letters. Other times I'd just tuck it into the drawer next to the others, like it was resting. Because by then, it had done its job. It had been heard. It had lived a life. And that was enough.
When a cassette had all the right songs, when the label was carefully decorated and the recordings were clean, or at least mostly clean, there came a point when it couldn't stay private anymore, because part of the magic of those tapes was sharing them. Letting someone borrow one of your mixes was like handing over a piece of your heart. It wasn't just music. It was effort, memory, proof that you had been there, sitting by the radio, finger ready, breath held, catching something fleeting and turning it into something real. And when you let someone borrow it, you didn't do it casually. It was a ritual, First, there was the decision. Who could be trusted? Not everyone qualified. Some kids were careless, shoving tapes into their backpacks with no case, letting them rattle around with loose crayons and half-eaten fruit roll-ups. Others didn't understand the weight of what they were holding. They'd press record over the last track by accident or leave it too close to the TV speaker, letting magnetism bleed the sound into mush. But if you found someone who got it, someone who looked at your tape like it was treasure, that was different. That was special. I remember the first time I let someone borrow my favorite tape. The one with A Long December, Always Be My Baby, Name, and my prized recording of Torn. The one I'd waited days for and managed to catch from the very first breath. Her name was Rachel. We sat 2 desks apart in class and always passed notes when the teacher turned to the chalkboard. Most of them were silly doodles, smiley faces with speech bubbles, or fake quiz answers like C, marshmallow, written in bright gel pen. But one day she asked me, "Did you get that Savage Garden song yet?" She meant Truly Madly Deeply. I nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, whole thing, no DJ." Her eyes went wide, like I'd just told her I owned a unicorn. "Can I hear it?" And I paused, because that was a big ask. Letting someone borrow the tape was like lending them your diary. It wasn't just a collection of songs. It was hours of effort, late afternoons of silence and concentration, doodles on the label that meant something, mistakes you didn't want erased, victories you wanted remembered. But I trusted her. So the next day, I slid the tape into a soft flannel pouch, the kind used for glasses, and tucked it carefully into my backpack. During recess, I handed it to her like it was made of glass. I said, "Don't leave it in the sun." She said, "I won't. And don't touch the ribbon. If it unspools, use a pencil." She nodded like she understood every word. Then she turned it over in her hands, reading my tiny handwriting on the label. Her fingers traced the stars I'd drawn beside the tracks. She smiled. "You got Torn from the very beginning?" I said, "Yeah, right from the start. No cuts." She looked up at me with wide eyes. "That's so rare." And I swear, in that moment, it was better than any compliment. Better than being picked first for kickball, better than a gold star on a math test, better than hearing your name announced over the school intercom for something good. It was recognition.
Not just that you liked good music, but that you worked for it. That you had waited, prepared, caught lightning in a bottle. That you had turned a broadcast into something permanent. For the next 2 days, I didn't have that tape, and I missed it. It was weird. I didn't expect to feel so empty without it, but I did. I kept reaching for it. I'd sit at my desk at home, staring at the empty spot in the drawer where it usually lived, imagining her pressing play and hearing the songs I'd worked so hard to capture. I wondered if she rewound them, if she was careful with the volume, if she listened in the same order I had written them. I hoped so. When she returned it, she handed it back with 2 hands and a little note inside the pouch. The note said, "Thank you. I listened to it 5 times. Your version of Truly Madly Deeply is cleaner than the one on my sister's CD. I think your tape is magic." And I just stared at the note for a second. Magic. That word stuck with me. Because she was right, in a way. Those tapes were magic. Not because of what was on them, but because of how they came to be. You couldn't download them, you couldn't duplicate them easily, you couldn't skip around or click shuffle or remove a song because it didn't fit your mood. You had to accept the tape as it was. And when you gave it to someone, not copied, but the original, you were trusting them with something fragile. The same way you trusted the radio to give you the song in the first place. After that, I started a little log in the back of one of my notebooks, a lending list.
Each time I let a friend borrow a tape, I'd write down who had it, what date, and what I told them. Do not leave near magnets. Side B has static. Track 6 was recorded during a thunderstorm. It felt official, and somehow it deepened the meaning of the whole thing. The tapes became a kind of currency, but not one you traded lightly. You lent them out with care, with instructions, with hope that they'd come back unharmed, but also with the pride of knowing someone else would get to live in those songs for a little while, the same way you had. Sometimes friends would bring them back and say things like, "Your version of Ironic starts a second too late, but it still sounds better." Or, "I love the tiny scratch sound before the chorus of Name. It's like it belongs there." Or even just, "Where did you get this one?" And the answer was always the same. I didn't get it. I made it.
There was a special kind of quiet that settled over the house late at night, just after the day had folded into itself and the last sounds of television or chatter had faded away. That stillness felt like a soft blanket wrapping the world in calm. It was the kind of silence where even the smallest noise, the hum of a clock, the distant bark of a dog, felt amplified. But in my room, the radio stayed on. Not loudly, just low enough that the music whispered through the darkness like a secret. The soft crackle of the speakers was a lullaby, an unspoken promise that something wonderful might happen, something just beyond reach, but close enough to feel. I would lie in bed, my head resting on the faded pillowcase with the tiny holes near the seams, the ones I had carefully patched with thread because they reminded me of home. My fingers curled around the cassette I'd just finished, the one that held all the songs I had recorded that day, the ones that had carried me through hours of waiting and hope. The radio was my companion then, its soft static and occasional DJ voice weaving a gentle tapestry of sound in the background, filling the room with stories and songs from faraway places. I often wondered about the people on the other side of those voices, the DJs, the announcers, the musicians whose songs I chased like precious treasures. What were their lives like? Did they know how much their voices and melodies meant to kids like me, sitting in bedrooms far from the bright city lights, listening with all our hearts? And sometimes, as the night grew deeper, the music would drift into lullabies, ballads that told stories of love and loss, songs that seemed to speak directly to the quiet spaces inside of me. I would close my eyes and imagine the next song I wanted to catch, the one I hoped would play tomorrow, the one I was sure I could record perfectly. Would it be a new hit? A secret track that no one else had noticed yet? Or maybe a song I'd heard just once on a car radio, with a melody so sweet it stayed in my mind like a daydream. The possibilities felt endless. There was something magical in that waiting, in falling asleep to the radio's gentle murmur, knowing that the next day held new chances, new sounds, new stories. Music wasn't just entertainment back then. It was a conquest, a treasure hunt, a form of magic. And every night as I drifted toward sleep, I felt the soft glow of hope that tomorrow, just maybe, I would catch another song, another moment frozen in time. That hope was as comforting as the familiar hum of the radio itself. It was the soundtrack of childhood, of patience, of dreams. And as the last song faded into silence, the red light on the boombox blinking steadily, I knew that even when the music stopped, the magic never truly left. Because the next song was always waiting, just around the corner, waiting for me to listen.